Hanging out a very productive carp fly today. This is the Morlock Carp Breakfast, and I can personally attest that this is a wonderful fly for catching carp and even smallmouth. It was originally tied and created for chasing carp up in the Great Lakes, specifically northern Michigan, around the Beaver Island archipelago. But it's a great smallmouth fly. I've caught lots of smallmouth on this up in that area, as well as in some of the local streams around here. But it's a straightforward pattern to tie, common materials. You can tie this in different colors and some different sizes depending on what your fishing requirements need. That is the Morlock Carp Breakfast. I'll get busy tying. Start the fly with my hook and the vise. This is a Tiemco 200R in a size 4. I'm going to go ahead and debarb the hook. The thread, I'm just using a black 70 Denier Danville or a 6/0. You can use something a little heavier if you want to, and you're not limited to using something a little bit lighter. I'm going to attach the thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook and run it down about another eye length, just putting a little bit of a base in. I'm going to stop maybe about 1.5 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. This is where I'm going to tie in the dumbbell eyes. Carp Breakfast just has some small yellow dumbbell eyes on it. If you wanted to, you could go up to like a medium size if you needed something a little bit heavier. Carp can get awfully spooky in shallow water. This fly is designed to cast to them when they are actively feeding and not as spooky, but at the same time, if you add too much weight to this, too much size and bulk, it can spook the fish. But in some circumstances, it may be a little bit deeper. You may be in 3-4 foot of water. You need to get the fly down a little bit quicker, and you want to use this particular pattern, then use, a medium or even a large size dumbbell eye to get that fly down a little bit quicker. I'm going to add some head cement to the wraps around that eye just to help secure that a little bit. With my thread at the end of the shank here, I'm going to go ahead and tie in my tail. Tail is just some olive Marabou. I'm going to select a fairly full plume. I want to tie that in about a hook length long. I'm going to get a couple wraps in, and then I'm going to wrap up the hook shank, just securing that extra bit of Marabou along the hook shank to give me just a little bit more bulk under the body. Trimming that away, I'll advance my thread back down. Here I want to keep going down a little bit and actually go over the bend down that curve just slightly so that the tail ends up having kind of a downward pointing in a downward direction. And the reason is that this is going to ride hook point up in the water. So having this down a little bit down that curve is going to kind of have that tail up a little bit more like this when this is riding in the water, as opposed to having it just straight back and down. I'm going to tie in some crystal flash. The Carp Breakfast calls for some copper crystal flash. Given the size here, I'm going to go with 3 to 4 strands, not a whole lot. Sometimes you might even want to tie these without the crystal flash, because sometimes the carp can get kind of finicky, and the flash, even though it's very small, kind of puts them off. But in this case, I'm going to tie in 3 strands. I'm going to tie these in so that they are just a little bit longer than the tail back here. Move my thread up the shank a little bit. Oh, looks like I have 4 strands in here. I'll take one out. Move my thread back down a little bit. I'm going to bring this over around to the other side and advance my thread down to the tail, and then I'm going to trim that as long as the others. I just want that crystal flash just a hair longer than the tail. The body has a rib on it. I'm using a small copper wire for the rib on this. The body itself is made of Peacock Herl. The rib is going to go in, and it's going to be wrapped counter to the Peacock Herl, which will help to reinforce that herl a little bit. Now I'm just using some strung Peacock Herl. You could use right off a feather if you want. This is a good fly for the strung stuff because sometimes the barbs, or I should say barbules on the strung ones, they kind of get squished, flattened, or even kind of rubbed off a little bit. But this one you can use, say, maybe 4 to 6 strands of Peacock Herl for the body. And it all evens out when you're wrapping that forward so you get a nice full body. I'm going to bring my thread down to maybe about an eye length behind the dumbbell eyes. I don't want to wrap this in right next to the dumbbell eyes. Then I'm going to wrap in this Peacock Herl for the body. You do want to make certain that you tie in some fairly long Peacock Herls. Got a lot of wraps to put in here. You don't want to end up being a little bit short. With the Peacock Herl wrapped in, I'm now going to use my wire, and as I mentioned, I wrapped away from me to wrap in the Peacock Herl, so I'm going to actually wrap towards me, and I'll put in 5, maybe 6 wraps here, making certain that I'm going well across that Peacock Herl to make certain that it gets bound in. This is just going to help reinforce that body a little bit, gives it a little bit of flash, maybe some segmentation look. I think mostly it's just there for reinforcement. Secure that in. I can fatigue that wire off. Sometimes it pops off real easy. Now we're going to tie in, for lack of a better term, the wing or the collar on this, made up of 3 different components. The first one is some mallard flank, and it is a light yellow mallard flank. This is a good fly, actually. If you have some of these feathers, the feather itself is fairly full, but the tips are kind of ragged. This is a good fly to use this on because you don't have to have all these tips nice and even. Say if you're putting this in for like a wing on a wet fly or something, because we're going to actually collar this in. So I'll isolate the tip, trim away the excess, give myself a little handle to tie in. I'll secure that down about halfway between the tie-in spot and the dumbbell eyes. I'm going to wrap this in, and I'm just going to get enough wraps to get me down more or less to the fluff there. I don't really want that fluff in the fly. If you get some in there, that's fine. I don't think it's going to really make a huge difference. I'll trim away the excess. Sweeping that back. A couple of wraps to make certain I have that all tied in. Don't worry if this looks a little bit messy right now. We're going to get that cleared up. Next is a little bit more crystal flash. I'm going to take another 2 strands of crystal flash here. I'm going to tie this in on both sides, but I'm going to bring this over first. And when I bring this in, I want the length to be about the same as the material in the wings. It's going to be about the same length as that mallard flank, but I'm going to bring it over to my side and down a little bit. Remember, I mentioned that this is going to ride hook point up. So what I'm looking for is I don't want this tied in facing down. I want this tied in facing up towards the upper side. Let me smooth this area off a little bit here. I got a bit of an abrupt little bump there with that mallard flank. Now you can always tie this in long and trim this back if you want. But as you can see, what I want this to be about as long as the wing and tied up and on the side a little bit, not facing downward. So we get both of those tied in, trim the other one the same length. Now we're ready for the last bit of our collar, and that is a ring-necked pheasant body feather. There's a lot of different body feathers that you can use off the ring-necked pheasant for this. There are some that are just kind of an all brown color, uniform brown, if that's what you want to use. I prefer to, in this instance, use what is called a church window. These are the very colorful feathers that they have with lots of modeling on them. I'm going to tie this in just like I did the mallard flank. Isolate the tip. Tie in a little handle there. And again, I'm only going to put in 2, maybe 3 wraps of this. I don't need a thick, bushy collar. I get one more wrap in there. The carp breakfast, I think, is tied mostly to resemble a goby. The invasive gobies that have gotten up in the Great Lakes are a big food supply for the carp, as well as the smallmouth bass. But it could also represent sculpin, possibly even a crawdad. I mean, any kind of bottom-dwelling food source that the carp have. I'm going to wrap backwards, just making certain I have all those hackles tied in. So as you see, you get a nice colorful collar there. Has some nice contrast with that church window in there. Now I'm going to tie in 2 to 3 strands of Peacock Herl. These I'm going to twist up in the thread so that I'm going to make basically a little dubbing brush of Peacock Herl to wrap around, crisscross wrap over those eyes and cover up all those thread wraps. So I'm going to make a dubbing loop here. Bring that forward to my tie-in spot. Wait a minute. I guess I have to tie in Peacock Herl first. So let me get that tied in. Just got one step ahead of myself. Even up the tips on those. Just tie those in. Now I'll make my dubbing loop. You want the loop to be about as long as those herls. Bring the little thread up front. I'll bring those herls down. And I just accidentally pulled one of them out. And I'm going to collect those herls and the thread together. Easiest way, there's different ways you can do this. I find the easiest is just to pinch all of them in your dubbing or in your hackle pliers and then just twist it up. It doesn't really matter that I accidentally pulled one herl out, because as you'll see, what you're looking for is just a long brush of Peacock Herl. You can get a couple wraps across the eyes here, get another one around the back. I'll get a couple wraps across this way. Then I'll twist that up a little bit more. Now I'll get a couple more wraps right around the back. And then I'll bring it forward to get a couple wraps in. And all I'm doing here is just cleaning up around those dumbbell eyes and all those exposed thread wraps. If I had a third or fourth strand of Peacock Herl in there, it might be a little bit thicker. If you want it a little thicker and bushier around there, you can, but you can see that adequately covers everything up, and it just gives it kind of a neater look to the head of the fly. Trimming away the excess, I'll wrap all that down, make the head of the fly, and then put in my whip finish. Put some head cement all along those thread wraps. Because now the Peacock Herl up here is also twisted in here, which will help protect it, that thread in there, but I like to put a little bit of head cement on there. I'm not looking for this to, again, be soft, and when the fish bites down on it, it feels something soft around those eyes. It's to cover up the thread wraps and make it look a little more natural around those eyes. So that fly tight will soak down in there, and it'll just help protect that Peacock Herl just a little bit more. So that is the Morlock Carp Breakfast. I can attest this is a wonderful carp fly. You can tie these in a little bit smaller size if you want, or even a little bit bigger. Depends on the fish you're throwing to. Popular colors are the olive right here and yellow. Generally an olive tail. You can do olive on the mallard flank as well. You can do some other colors, black, but generally the olive and yellow is probably the standard color. So that's the Morlock Carp Breakfast. Thanks for watching. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com, where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. And what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.